The world often feels like a dangerous place. We are bombarded with news of wars, terrorism, and conflict. Faced with these threats, many believe that a strong army is essential for our security. We are told it is the only way to deter aggression and protect our interests. But what if this is just an illusion? What if true security lies not in weapons and armies, but in cooperation and understanding? The idea that the military brings security is a dangerous myth. It is a myth perpetuated by those who profit from war and conflict. We are told we must be prepared to fight for our freedom, but in reality, they are the ones trapping us in a cycle of violence. Throughout history, military force has often been used not to protect people, but to control them. It has been used to suppress dissent, to maintain oppressive regimes, and to wage wars of aggression in the name of profit and power. The truth is that the military is not a guarantor of security, but a threat to it. The pursuit of military strength often leads to a dangerous arms race. This creates a climate of fear and suspicion, where even the smallest disagreement can escalate into conflict. In such a world, true security remains elusive. War is a brutal and destructive force. It leaves a trail of death, destruction, and suffering in its wake. Families are torn apart, communities are shattered, and entire nations are scarred by violence. But the cost of war goes far beyond the immediate casualties and physical damage. The economic costs of war are staggering. Vast sums of money are poured into military spending, diverting resources from essential services like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. This can cripple economies, leaving nations impoverished and struggling to rebuild. The social costs of war are equally devastating. War can lead to widespread displacement, as people are forced to flee their homes in search of safety. It can also exacerbate existing social problems, such as poverty, inequality, and discrimination. The psychological scars of war can last for generations. Soldiers often return from combat suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, haunted by the horrors they have witnessed. Civilians can also be deeply traumatized by the experience of war, leaving them with lasting emotional and mental health problems. Throughout history, there have been countless examples of the devastating consequences of militarism. From the ancient empires of Rome and Greece to the modern conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan, war has always brought more suffering than solutions. The 20th century saw 2 world wars that claimed millions of lives. These conflicts were a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for destruction. Even afterward, the world struggled to break free from the grip of militarism. The Cold War saw a nuclear arms race that threatened to annihilate the planet. While there was no direct confrontation between the superpowers, it fueled proxy wars and regional conflicts around the globe. The war on terror has led to invasions and occupations that have destabilized entire regions, often exacerbating the very problems they were intended to solve. In today's world, military spending continues to consume a vast amount of global resources. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military spending reached a record $2.1 trillion in 2021. This represents a significant increase in real terms from the previous year and highlights the continued prioritization of military spending over other essential needs. This obsession with military might comes at a steep price. The money spent on weapons and armies could be used to address some of the world's most pressing problems, such as poverty, hunger, disease, and climate change. Imagine if just a fraction of the trillions spent on weapons were redirected towards these challenges. We could provide education for every child on the planet, ensure access to clean water and sanitation for all, and invest in renewable energy sources to combat climate change. Section 5. The Arms Race and Global Insecurity. Rather than making the world safer, the pursuit of military supremacy often has the opposite effect. When one nation increases its military capabilities, it can trigger a security dilemma, where neighboring countries feel compelled to respond in kind. This can lead to a dangerous arms race, where each side seeks to outdo the other in terms of military power. The arms race is not just a competition between nations. It is also a lucrative business for arms manufacturers. These companies profit from the sale of weapons and often lobby governments to increase military spending. This creates a vicious cycle, where the pursuit of profit fuels the arms race and undermines global security. The proliferation of weapons, particularly nuclear weapons, poses a grave threat to humanity. A single nuclear detonation could have catastrophic consequences, killing millions of people and causing widespread environmental damage. Section 6. The human cost of war. Behind the statistics and geopolitical analysis, it is important to remember that war is ultimately a human tragedy. Every casualty statistic represents a life lost, a family shattered, and a community torn apart. War inflicts unimaginable suffering on individuals, families, and communities. Soldiers, often young men and women barely old enough to understand the complexities of the conflicts they are caught up in, are forced to confront death and destruction on a daily basis. They witness horrors that leave them with physical and emotional scars, often for life. Civilians, often caught in the crossfire, face the constant threat of violence, displacement, and loss. They lose their homes, their livelihoods, and their loved ones. Children are particularly vulnerable in conflict zones. They are often denied access to education, healthcare, and other essential services. They are also at risk of being recruited by armed groups, experiencing sexual violence, and being exploited. Section 7. The abuse of power. History is replete with examples of militaries abusing their power. From brutal dictatorships to corrupt regimes, military forces have often been used as instruments of oppression and repression. In some cases, the military has seized control of governments through coup d'état, overthrowing democratically elected leaders and installing authoritarian regimes. These regimes often rule through fear and intimidation, suppressing dissent and violating the human rights of their citizens. Even in countries where the military is ostensibly under civilian control, there have been countless cases of soldiers committing atrocities against civilians, including extrajudicial killings, torture, and rape. These acts of violence are not only morally reprehensible, but they are also deeply damaging to the social fabric of a nation. Section 8. Alternatives to militarism. If we want to create a more peaceful and just world, we must find alternatives to militarism. We must challenge the assumption that military force is the only way to resolve conflicts and ensure security. There are many other ways to address the root causes of conflict and build a more just and equitable world. Diplomacy and dialogue are essential for resolving disputes peacefully. By engaging in constructive dialogue, parties to a conflict can better understand each other's perspectives, identify common ground, and work towards mutually acceptable solutions. International cooperation is crucial for addressing global challenges such as climate change, poverty, and pandemics. By working together, nations can share resources, expertise, and technology to find solutions that benefit everyone. Investing in human security, which prioritizes the well-being of people over the accumulation of military power, is essential for creating a more sustainable and just world. This means investing in education, healthcare, economic opportunity, and social justice for all. Section 9. The path to peace. Building a more peaceful world will require a fundamental shift in our thinking. We must move away from the idea that security is achieved through military force and embrace a more holistic, human-centered approach. We must challenge the glorification of war and violence that pervades so much of our culture. We must teach our children to resolve conflicts peacefully and to value empathy, compassion, and respect for all people. We must hold our leaders accountable for their decisions and demand that they prioritize diplomacy and peaceful solutions over military intervention. We must also hold the arms industry accountable for the devastating consequences of its trade. The path to peace is not easy, but it is the only path that offers hope for a better future. By embracing diplomacy, cooperation, and a commitment to human security, we can create a world where war is no longer an option and all people can live in peace and dignity.